Hey everyone, and welcome to the show. It's funny when you think about it, believing is kind of like breathing. We're always doing it, even when we don't realize it. It
Yeah,
shapes everything, the choices we make, our relationships, even how we see the world.
it really is the invisible framework that holds our lives together.
Exactly. And that's what we're diving deep into today, belief itself. We've got Alister McGrath's book, Why We Believe.
Great book.
And if you're into philosophy, psychology, or just understanding, what makes us tick, this one's for you. Hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss any future deep dives.
And McGrath himself is super interesting. Started out as an atheist, converted to Christianity. Now he's exploring the connections between science and faith.
Yeah, his background is fascinating.
And his book, Why We Believe, even though it talks about religion, it's actually about way more than that. It's really about human nature.
You can find a link to that in the description, by the way. So he argues that belief isn't just about, religious faith, right? It's this basic human thing that shows up everywhere.
Yeah, you believe things about politics, about what's right and wrong, even about pineapple on pizza.
Okay, maybe not everyone believes in pineapple on pizza.
Right, right.
But I get your point. We all have these beliefs, these underlying assumptions.
Exactly. And McGrath uses a really interesting example from literature to kind of make this point. Thomas Gradgrind from Dickens' Hard Times.
Oh yeah, the guy who's obsessed with facts. What's the connection there?
So Gradgrind, he represents this worldview that's all about facts, numbers, data, nothing else. And McGrath uses him to show just how limited that kind of thinking can be. Can facts alone really give you meaning? Can they tell you how to live a good life?
Good question. And just thinking about my own life, it's not just about the facts, right? I need something more.
You and everyone else, we crave something more, something beyond just the cold, hard data. McGrath actually calls this the Gradgrind paradox.
Ooh, I like that, the Gradgrind paradox. Okay, so we need facts, but we also need something more, something to give those facts meaning.
Right, and it's like we're wired for both reason and something, maybe even more transcendent.
I think that's what Hermann Hesse is getting at in Siddhartha, that searching for meaning is a fundamental human need, as basic as needing food or shelter.
Absolutely, we see it everywhere, right? People trying to connect the dots, find patterns, make sense of the world, even when it's confusing.
It's like we're always looking for that bigger picture.
Yeah, and that often leads us to embrace these big picture narrative, these belief systems. Think about things like Marxism or Christianity.
Okay, so these big systems give us a way to understand the world, a place to fit in. But didn't McGrath himself start out as, a Marxist? What happened there?
He did as a teenager, but eventually he, became a disillusioned. He even talks about reading Karl Popper's critiques of Marxism and how that opened his eyes to the potential downsides of these grand narratives.
Interesting how our beliefs can change so much over time. What do you think drives those changes? Is it all intellectual, or is there an emotional component too?
I think it's often both. Think about how our understanding of science changes. For centuries, people thought the Earth was the center of the universe.
Well, yeah, it looks that way, right?
Right, the sun seems like it's going around us. But then Copernicus comes along and says, nope, it's the other way around. The Earth goes around the sun, and boom, the whole picture changes.
And that completely changed how we understood the universe, even though, the basic facts were still the same.
Exactly, a different lens to view the same information.
Speaking of seeing things differently, remember that story about John Flamsteed, the astronomer who, mistook Uranus for a star?
Oh, yeah. It wasn't until way later that someone was like, wait, that star's moving kind of funny.
It's actually a planet.
Exactly. Same object, totally different understanding.
It's like perspective is everything.
And that just goes to show how our beliefs have a real impact on our lived experience. They're not just ideas. They shape how we experience the world, how we feel, how we act.
And that reminds me of Paul Clemence's book, When Breath Encups Air. He was a neurosurgeon, and he found so much comfort in Christianity while facing his own mortality.
Powerful book.
It really shows how our beliefs shape our experience of joy, suffering, even how we face death.
It's like our beliefs don't just inform us, they inform how we experience the world.
Exactly. And sometimes it's those shared experiences, those shared beliefs that bring people together, right?
Of course, we're naturally drawn to people who see the world the way we do, who share our values.
Like a basic human need, right? To belong, to be understood, to find that sense of shared purpose.
Yeah, and these communities built around shared beliefs can be incredible sources of support, especially in a world that can feel so fragmented and isolating. However,
Are you about to bring up the dark side of belief?
well, gotta look at both sides, right? Wouldn't be a true deep dive otherwise.
You got a point there. But let's unpack that after a quick word from our sponsor. Don't go anywhere.
So yeah, I was saying these communities, based on shared beliefs, they can be really supportive.
Right. But you were about to get to the downside, weren't you?
Yeah, well, history's kind of a mess, isn't it? Full of examples where belief, especially the really strong kind, leads to conflict.
It's true, you can't ignore that.
Like, think about all the religious wars in Europe, or how people were persecuted for their beliefs under certain regimes. It just goes to show that even beliefs that are supposed to bring peace can be twisted, you know?
Yeah, definitely something to think about, especially now with everything going on. How do you balance, like, having strong beliefs with being tolerant in a world where everyone's got different opinions?
Big question, right? And it's even harder these days with all this, what do they call it, effective polarization?
Affective polarization. That sounds kind of scary.
It can be. It's like people don't just disagree anymore. They like really dislike each other. It's not just the ideas, it's this feeling of being threatened by the other side.
Right, it's more about, like, demonizing the other side than actually understanding them, which makes having a real conversation pretty much impossible.
Exactly. So how do we deal with that? Well, McGrath has some thoughts.
I'm listening.
He says even though we may never totally agree on our deepest beliefs, we can at least try to understand where those beliefs are coming from, how they make people see the world. He calls it intellectual empathy.
Intellectual empathy, huh? So, like, putting yourself in someone else's shoes, even if you don't agree with them.
Yeah, like trying to see the world through their eyes. Not change your mind, but to get why they believe what they believe.
I think I get it. It's recognizing that there are, like, different ways of seeing things. Doesn't mean you have to give up your own beliefs.
Exactly. But it means being open to learning something new.
And this is especially important for, the people who are supposed to be bridging the gap between the experts and everyone else, the public and intellectuals. They need to explain things clearly, but also be respectful of different viewpoints.
Totally. It's about creating a dialogue, not just more division.
So, bringing it back to us regular folks, what does this all mean? What's the takeaway here?
Well, McGrath leaves us with a really powerful statement. He says, believing is not only intellectually defensible, but existentially necessary. What do you think he means by that?
That's deep. I think he's saying that beliefs aren't just some optional extra in life. They're essential to who we are, how we find meaning.
I agree. It makes you think about your own beliefs, right? What are the things that shape how you see the world? How do they affect your choices, your relationships?
So much to think about. And to think, we started off just talking about how believing is like breathing.
Right. It's something we do all the time without even thinking about it. But understanding it better can help us understand ourselves better, be more understanding of others, maybe even live a more fulfilling life.
One thing that really stuck with me is how McGrath talked about the connection between our need to believe and our evolution.
Yeah, that was fascinating.
We have this incredible ability to think rationally, to use science, but we're also wired to search for patterns, to find meaning, even when it might not be there.
It's like this constant struggle between our rational side and our yearning side, the skeptic and the believer, all in one.
And this ties into the idea of communities of belief that we were talking about earlier.
Exactly. We form these communities not just for social connection, but to reinforce our shared beliefs.
It's finding your tribe, people who understand where you're coming from, who make you feel like you belong.
And those communities can be incredibly powerful. They shape our identities, influence history.
Think about the role of religion in different social movements, or how political beliefs can mobilize people.
It shows how belief is never just a personal thing. It always has a social dimension.
Which brings us back to that question of how we handle disagreements, especially the ones that go really deep.
Especially when it feels like everything's getting more polarized and hostile.
It's definitely a challenge.
But McGrath gives us some tools. He talks about the importance of intellectual humility, recognizing that our own perspective is just one piece of the puzzle.
And that intellectual empathy thing we were talking about. Trying to understand other people's viewpoints, even if you don't agree with them.
Right. It's about accepting that there are different ways of seeing the world. And that doesn't mean giving up your own beliefs, but it does mean being open to learning from others.
It's a call for curiosity, being open-minded, and being willing to have those tough conversations.
Because those conversations, even when they're difficult, can help us grow and understand each other better.
It's like we're all contributing to this big, ongoing conversation about what it means to be human.
And about what we believe and why.
Well said. So as we wrap up this deep dive into why we believe, I want to leave our listeners with one final question to think about.
What's that?
What are your most deeply held beliefs? And how do they shape your view of the world?
That's a question we should all be asking ourselves, not just once, but throughout our lives.
Because our beliefs are always changing, being challenged, shaping who we are.
Exactly. And that's a good thing. It means we're growing, learning, becoming more open.
So to our listeners, what really stood out to you in this deep dive? What resonated with your own experience?
We'd love to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below, and let's keep this conversation going.
And don't forget to check out Why We Believe by Alister McGrath. You can find a link in the episode description.
It's a book that will make you think, make you curious, and maybe even inspire you to look at your own beliefs in a new way.
Thanks for joining us on this journey, everyone. Until next time, keep diving deep. It really is amazing, like all these different perspectives coming together.
Yeah, it's like we're all part of this giant tapestry of like human thought and experience, and everyone brings their own unique beliefs to the table.
And those beliefs connect and create something bigger than ourselves. So as we wrap up our deep dive into why we believe, I want to focus on what our listeners can take away from this.
What are some key things you think people should remember?
Well, first off, I think it's important to understand that belief is way bigger than just religion. It's a fundamental part of being human. It shows up in everything we do.
Right, from our political views to our morals to like the little choices we make every day. Our beliefs are at the core of who we are and how we interact with the world.
And I think McGrath makes a really strong argument that believing isn't just okay, it's actually crucial.
Yeah, like we need beliefs to make sense of things, to find purpose, to connect with each other.
And that's something to really think about. It's not just about being right or wrong. It's about needing these beliefs to make life meaningful. And the last thing I think is really important to remember is that our beliefs aren't static. They're constantly changing. We're always learning new things, challenging our old assumptions, and refining how we see the world.
And that's a good thing. It means we're growing, becoming more open-minded.
Exactly. So to everyone listening, what really stood out to you in this deep dive? What connected with your own experiences and beliefs?
Let us know in the comments. We'd love to keep this conversation going.
And don't forget to check out Why We Believe by Alister McGrath. The link is in the episode description, as always.
It's a book that will really challenge you to think differently, to get curious, and maybe even take a fresh look at your own beliefs.
Thanks for joining us on this journey, everyone. Until next time, keep diving deep.